All right. Flame River is a good one. It's a good one, Kathleen. I don't know what mine is. I'm trying
It's
to
so
think.
tough.
I know. Um, ugh.
Steeple top.
Mm.
Is that the largest?
It was
Hmm.
now Concord Ridge is
Okay.
by about Steeple top is a little over 1,200 acres, and Concord Ridge is close to 1,800.
Wow. You know what? I think Parsons Marsh is mine. All right. Oh, it feels nice that it's still a little bit light out right now at 5 o'clock in
I
the
know.
evening. It's not pitch black, so that's kind of a positive. Um, we will, we can get started, I think. Let's see here. You guys spotlighted, I believe so. Um, yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight. For the program that we're going to be discussing, we're going to take a trip behind the scenes for the 2024, this past year's for the trail work season of 2024. I'm Taylor. I'm the community conservation manager for BNRC. I'm also joined tonight by Kathleen Smolinski, BNRC's assistant director of fundraising. And our speakers tonight are our director of stewardship, Doug Brown, and the trail crew leader, Jonathan Lueken. So, hello, everybody. I just want to make sure you guys are spotlighted.
It's okay if not.
I don't really know what that necessarily does, but I think everybody is here. All right. And I am going to stop sharing my, oh, nice. Mag's here. Hi, Mag. Um, Parsons Marsh, nice. Burbank Loop. Ooh, those are some good ones. Great. So for those unfamiliar, BNRC is a regional land trust that is working throughout Berkshire County on land conservation, land stewardship, and community engagement. BNRC conserves land to protect water resources, wildlife habitat, for climate resilience, as well as connecting people to nature through accessibility and engaging activities. That connection to nature can take many forms, like enjoying trails, bird watching, supporting local farms, and it can be deepened by both learning about and engaging with the land. So, in the spirit of learning, let us pause for a quick moment and acknowledge the deep connection of the Mohican people to this land in Berkshire County, their historic homelands. They called themselves the people of the waters that are never still, and they lived and cared for what we now call the Berkshires and well beyond for thousands of years before Europeans forcibly seized their lands with neither shame nor remorse. Today, their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Muncie community. These lands continue to be of significance to the Mohican people with numerous ways to engage, learn, and deepen your connection. And we'll send some resources along in our follow-up email, but we ask that you just give a little bit of thought to the native land in which you're zooming in from tonight, whether that's Berkshire County or someplace else. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Kathleen. Kathleen Smolinski is our Assistant Director of Fundraising, and she'd like to say a few words.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Taylor. Just first and foremost, wanted to say that this is one of my favorite presentations of the year. And you're in for a treat. There was a lot of really great work that took place in 2024. Thank you to the stewardship team for all of their efforts on BNRC reserves throughout Berkshire County. Want to send a few special thank yous out, specifically to the partners and volunteers that support the work that you're going to hear about. I see a number of you in the attendee list here, so it's great. Glad to have you. And also extend a thank you, of course, to BNRC donors whose generous support makes the work possible that you're going to hear about. If you'd like to make a gift, you don't have to, no obligation, but I'm going to throw the bnrc.org/donate link into the chat, so you can feel free to head over that way. But with that, let's let the presentation begin.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Go ahead, Doug.
I'm going to just screen share. If you can all hold on just a moment. All right. Are folks able to see this? A thumbs up from somebody would be great. Great. I will take that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Taylor. All right. So thank you all. The slideshow is going to present just a snapshot of some of the major projects that we went through this year. I will kind of lay the context for a number of them, and John will talk about the details. This work is reflective of the investment of many of our full-time staff, as well as several seasonal staff that we bring on every year to help us achieve our work, as well as hundreds of volunteer hours and support from contractors as well. So we really reached into a lot of different venues to get this work done. All right, now if I can figure, there we go. So the year started out, we had 7 seasonal crew, including 2 folk who returned this year, to execute a wide range of stewardship, maintenance, and building projects throughout the system, many of which will be highlighted. We also, we are continuing to try to create efficiency and bring on the right equipment to help us get the job done appropriately. So this past season, we added the Canicom, which is the tracked wheelbarrow there, which has been immeasurably helpful this year, and John can talk about more, as well as the plate compactor to help us ensure that the trails are stable, as well as the work on particularly our accessible trails to make sure that the surface is consistent and compacted. So this first project we're going to talk about, this is the 3 Mile Hill bog bridging replacement. This happened in Great Barrington. The work is about halfway done, starting from the section on Berkshire South and BNRC's property, and we're going to continue the work on DCR's Fountain Pond State Park this coming season. There are multiple access points, again, Berkshire South, Community Health Centers, Great Barrington campus, as well as the Fountain Pond State Park parking on Route 7. And this project was funded from the Great Barrington CPA. So John, why don't you take it away?
Sounds good. Well, hello, everybody. Like it was said, I'm Jonathan Lueken. I've been leading the trail crew now for quite a few years. And yeah, so the 3 Mile Hill bog bridging replacement, it was a really fun project. It was a collaboration of our trail crew, of BNRC staff, and as well as many, many volunteers doing quite a few volunteer work days throughout the season to replace a lot of sections of bog bridging that had rotted or were unstable or just kind of unsafe. So, to begin with, we had to get all the materials up there, which started out with, using our, Doug mentioned the track wheelbarrow, the material hauler, which one of our crew affectionately named Candy the Canicom. But to bring the boards for the actual decking, as well as the sills that the decking goes on top of. So those would be brought up to a certain point about to the trail, and then they'd be carried by hand to the areas where they were being installed. You can see on the left there, me and one of our trail crew, Onyx, using the timber carriers with some wheels on the back to bring some boards up. Next slide, Doug. And then once we get the material there, it's many of the volunteers who here, maybe some of them were involved in the work. It started out with digging in the sills, getting them level, getting them ready to receive the boards themselves. And then once they were set and level, we put the boards down, screw them in. Sometimes we'd be, the trail's obviously not straight. So as you turn corners, you'd have to cut angles on the, as you can see in this middle picture here, to kind of make joints so as the trail turns, the bog bridging turns with it. And once they were all in place, we'd screw them down, and then you would have you're ready to go.
Great. Thank you, John. So this next project is kind of not quite the finishing, because there's never really a finishing in trail work, but the kind of end cap of a rehabilitation project that started in 2020 at the Old Mill Trail. The total project, which has been talked in past seasons, encompassed creating a terminus to our accessible trail, making some improvements and bringing the trail up back to its designed standard, and then funding for the engineering and permitting for an improved parking area. We became aware that the parking area itself was the biggest and first barrier to reasonable access to the property. It was an old section of town road, so it was a mix of dirt and broken up asphalt. And so Mass Trails funded that, and then we had a private donation from a number of years ago, restricted to helping us expand access, that we utilized to build the rest of the parking lot area. So John, why don't you talk us through the details, please?
Yeah, so it started out with us just preparing the area. One of the big things about, with designing this parking lot was making sure that we were protecting the branch of the Housatonic River that it was on. And so the first thing was clearing out all the poison ivy and other stuff out there and putting in erosion control, so that anything coming through the work, the water going through the construction site wouldn't leach down into the river. So, our crew started out just by putting silt fencing and wattles to just keep anything from washing down into the river. That was the first step. Next slide. And then we had a great contractor, Justin Thompson, who did a lot of the work with the machinery, digging up and spreading out. But our crew was able to help him with a lot of the handwork. And of course, we had a trusty foreman on site. There's Odin, the golden retriever, who kept us on the job while he went and swam in the river. So, but yeah, we were able to help out with a lot of different handwork aspects. One of them being installing the railing, which was in front of the river, and on either side in front of the parking areas. And it was very handy to have the big machinery, because instead of taking a post hole digger and taking 15, 20 minutes to dig a 3-foot hole, he would just come in with his big auger and dig it down, and then we would set it. And it was a pretty streamlined process and made it go pretty quick. So after the post, we attached the railing, screwed together. We trimmed off the ends, and just made everything look nice. And then after that, there was some work with the excavator, like banking up the soil and putting in you can see on the right, two of our trail crew, Stephen and Jared, who are this season, they were fixing a kind of a drain in front of that, so any water that goes down would be caught in that drain and not just go right over down into the river. And they helped with spreading out the gravel and laying down a barrier cloth and all those other steps. Next slide. So one of the designs of the parking lot was to install rain gardens, one on either side. And the purpose of rain gardens being to catch and absorb any water that's either running from the uphill down into the parking lot, or any water that runs through the parking lot and down over. And so they were spread out, like mulch and loam was laid down. And then we had a bunch of staff, as well as some awesome volunteers, who came out, and we planted a variety of blueberry, silky dogwood, meadowsweet, swamp rose, and a bunch of other native plants that are going to grow up and be a beautiful kind of looking garden, that are also going to have be able to suck up all that water and just be a nice kind of catchment area for any water that might flow through the parking lot or towards the parking lot.
Thank you, John. I think it's worth clarifying that some of these specifics are because of the proximity of the parking lot to the Housatonic River,
Yes.
in this case, the East Branch. So state Water Protection Act law requires us to do some really serious mitigation when we're making alterations within that area. So this is part of why we had engineers and wetlands permitting specialists involved in the process, to really ensure that we are doing our part to improve the habitat, even though we are making a bigger human physical imprint in this shoreline area. One of the last pieces of this that we don't have a map for this is the acquisition and protection of another parcel of land along this branch of the Housatonic to help create additional offsite permanent conservation as mitigation. Hopefully we'll have a project to share with everybody later this calendar year that will meet that obligation, and help us close out this project so we can move on to the next big fix at the Old Mill Trail.
Another aspect, which has kind of been a continual process over the last couple years, is taking different sections at a time and restoring the accessible trail. A lot of times over time, the grass and the weeds and stuff will start growing into the gravel until your trail tread starts to shrink and become narrower and narrower till it's no longer accessible. So one of the things that our crew worked on was digging out all that stuff and reestablishing the proper width of the trail edge, and then laying down more material, spreading it out, making sure we had good grades and transitions, like going up to the bridge, because sometimes it'll wear away and you'll have like a lip going up to the bridge, which might be hard for, say, a wheelchair or something like that to go up onto the bridge. So making sure those transitions onto the bridge and the trail edges are all nice, and then spreading out and material, and then compacting it so that it's, good as new and accessible and flat and as wide as it needs to be. And along with the working on the trail tread, we also installed a new kiosk with more up-to-date information and also just a better design. Looks really great. And so the picture on the left was an area that we cleared out and with the help of the excavator, and then spread out the gravel and then installed it. Thanks to Josh Hopmans, who is our property manager, who's the one who actually built the kiosk. And there's the finished product, minus the rain garden planting. We did that a little bit later, but.
Thank you, John. Stewardship work also requires a little bit of reaction to things that happen. One of those things, unfortunately, this year was this very beautiful bench that we got from Peter Thorne, who's a carpenter in West Stockbridge, was thrown from the overlook at Stevens Glen. And so our crew had to actually ascend the cascade to recover the bench, and then Peter was able to repair it. We then, in the learning from our previous mistakes, we chose to bolt down the bench this second time around, so that people's less than best intentions can't necessarily require so much time and follow-up. John, I think this one was you as well. So
yeah. So in addition to human things causing problems on the trail, we also have natural causes. And this was a root ball, a tree that had kind of ripped up out of the trail, and it was right in the middle of the trail tread. So people were going around the trail, starting to cause a social around it. So our crew started working on it, thinking it would be a few-hour task. But as it turned out, it took 2 or 3 times of going at digging and chopping out roots, and it was to the point where you see the picture in the bottom corner where they have their feet on it, and it's because it was great satisfaction to actually conquer the thing after all the digging and hacking we did. So we were finally able to remove it, and then you can see at the bottom corner picture the repaired trail tread as it should be.
great, thank you, John. So one project that we, and by we I mean really our crew, led by Tyler and John, spent significant time at this year was the preparation of the Tomball Mountain Reserve. This will be a brand new public reserve in Great Barrington and Alford, that we have a planned opening for late spring of this year. These properties were acquired by BNRC in 2020 and 2021, and we've had to go through a pretty lengthy process with a neighbor to sort out some issues so that we could really figure out where the best public access point is. Ultimately, that time was appropriate because we landed and we acquired property on Alford Road that's going to allow us to really build a very visible and reasonable public landing spot to bring people up into this property. This first phase, and when I say first phase, I mean it's because we'll be doing additional work, which I can talk about in a moment, opens up a 3.2-mile round trip lollipop trail loop, where if you go clockwise, you have a moderate option. If you go counterclockwise, you encounter a fairly steep portion, which can certainly get your heart rate up and make it a much more exciting climb. This project in particular, we got funding from the Great Barrington CPA, the Terriot Foundation, Fields Pond. We utilized BNRC's High Road Fund, as well as numerous private donations. There's a lot more work to come, and this is going to be where John and our colleagues are going to be spending a good chunk of the spring, putting the final touches on to make this grand open property, and we can't wait to invite you all out there. Speaking about the next phase, some of the design work that we'll be doing is figuring out how to bring in access to Round Pond, which is that pond to the north, where we'll be able to bring people close to the pond edge to give a new type of experience for BNRC users with car top boat access and other features, and also connect trails up onto the ridge. In the future, we hope that this property is able to connect to the summit of Tomball Mountain itself, which offers stunning views of Alford Valley, the Catskills, and beyond. So much more to come here. This is a big project that we're going to be working on and off for many, many years to come, but we can't wait to bring you all out there. So John, your steps.
Yes, indeed. This was a really cool project. Definitely, I have to say it was the highlight of my season, of the 2024 season. Just so many cool aspects to it. In addition to a lot of really good quality woods roads, there was also some really neat, I would say even historical carriage roads. The one you're looking at now is it kind of snakes up the side of this steep ridge, going right up to the top of the southern ridge portion of Tomball, and it's amazing that these people, in the early 1900s pulled this off with these massive rocks. And so one of the things that we ended up doing, and you can actually go to the next slide and see some of the work, is with the help of the Greenagers, first thing in the spring, and then with our trail crew, we restored large sections of that wall, which some of which were decades or even a century old, that were starting to kind of fall down or fall apart. So we rebuilt a lot of that retaining wall, this trail that just comes out of the side of this steep hill. And so pretty awesome work. There was 440 square feet of stone retaining wall rebuilt. And in the process of, all the switchbacks, there were a lot of steep areas. We built about 29 stone steps installed through the various staircases. And sometimes the rocks were just too big to lift, so we were able to utilize a high-line rigging system using our grip hoist, which is a very strong mechanical pulling mechanism. And by putting up blocks and using physics and all that cool stuff, we were able to lift them up on this line and just kind of slide them around on this pulley and drop them right where we needed. And some of the sections, we had to take the rocks out like 7 or 8 feet down and then build up from the bottom to the top. So it was quite the process, but a lot of fun. In addition to supplementing the existing wall structures, all the rocks we got were on site. We also had to quarry a lot of stone, which means look for it, find it. And because of the steep pitch of the hillside, we often used our grip hoist to, bring rocks down the hill. And we also were splitting rocks to, get a really big rock and make 2 or 3 steps to, get the right dimensions for our steps as well. The grip hoist was very useful in making sure that the rocks we were trying to roll down the hill would stay on the rope and not roll down on us, which is very important for safety. So it worked out very well.
Great. So a big part of this is developing a public access landing point. So, when we talk about those access points, we're talking about trailheads. This is one, where we're putting a trailhead kind of in a residential context. And so we want to be really thoughtful in thinking about how, in executing our mission of inviting the public to enjoy and connect with nature, that we might be putting impacts on our neighbors. And so the plan that we developed, we had some back and forth with neighbors to ensure that their peaceful enjoyment of their home, of their home business, wouldn't be overtly impacted by this use. And so it took a little bit more time, but we're really pleased with the outcome and that we have built up such a good and trusting relationship with the neighbors. Site work for this parking lot, which will be 13 spaces when completed, is actually going to begin quite soon with the clearing of the trees. And then our contractor is going to get on site as early as possible in the spring once the site conditions are dry enough to move and utilize the material in the layout. This parking lot is probably the biggest part of this project at this point. And we hope to, again, have it completed sometime in late spring to properly open and celebrate this property with everybody. So in addition to that big investment in the parking lot, other additional work happened with needing to relocate trail to be entirely on BNRC's portion of the property. And that includes over 800 feet of trail relocation, which John will talk about more in a moment.
Yeah, so like Doug said, a lot of trail relocations were done, and so it was some of it was done by hand, some of it was done by excavator, but just making a sustainable trail. And I'm going to talk about the excavator technique here in a second. But one of the additional things we did besides the relocations was also putting in boardwalks, sections totaling 160 feet and spanning stream beds and bordering vegetative wetlands, which, according to the Wetland Protections Act, must be spanned and can't be disturbed. So our crew worked really hard and we were able to get in all the footers as well as the stringers. And so over the winter, we'll be working on getting the decking on, and that will be ready to go this spring. But we'll make it so not only will your feet not get wet, but we will also won't be turning up sensitive areas as well.
Great. And John, I think some of the excavator stuff is here. Do you want to use this one, or jump to the next slide?
I want to jump to the next slide that kind of explains a little bit more.
Great.
Oh, I guess it's the following. So I guess I'll talk a little bit more about the boardwalks here before I jump into that. So you can see on the left this picture with all that water. That spot is the picture on the right, which in the summer was dry, but in the spring there was about 1.5 feet of water there. It's a non-jurisdictional subject to flooding classification, which means that we could dig in and put footers in, like to build our boardwalk. Otherwise, we would have had to come up with a creative way of spanning that. But it made it so we were able to make a fairly long section of boardwalk here, making things level and making it so that in the spring, you won't be wading through water, but there'll be a nice boardwalk going through there. Just the next slide should be our lift and tilt construction. And this was cool. It wasn't until I think last season of 2023 that we rented our first excavator and started to do excavator construction. And we realized, wow, you can get so much done with the machine than you can with two guys with a shovel and a pickaxe. So it was really nice because Tyler Fogg, the assistant director of stewardship, has a license for the excavator, and so he would go through and he would, grub up all the organic layer, the roots, the duff, the rocks, and there'd be a pretty good trough in there. But then he would go and he would source a good soil and dump it down in there, and then the trail crew would come and we'd spread it all out, grade it out. into like to the grade that needs to be. We'd fill in the pits so that there weren't gaping holes everywhere and naturalize those. And then you had a really nice trail that had good grades. It kind of wound through the woods, a very sustainable design. And the process, we got like, I think 1,500 feet of trail in I think a matter of a couple weeks. In fact, we would have done it a lot quicker if we had more rain and could actually compact the soil. But because of our dry fall, we were a little delayed on that. But it was really a great process, and it actually went very quickly with having the machine do much of the heavy work, and then us coming in and doing the finish work. It was great, very, very efficient.
Great. So I think I see that we've kind of cruised through these. So I'm going to just share a couple other things before we come back for questions. So one of the things that we do is we collect data at a number of key properties using Trafix. That's TRAFX. They're a company out of Canada that creates trail counters that gives us an approximation, a sense of what our visitation is across our reserves. These trends help us deploy resources where they are most needed. So if we understand that a property is heavily utilized, we can put more staff time to the regular care and maintenance. Old Mill Trail is one of those properties where we realized there's actually a lot more visitation here than we were aware of. And so we've been able to invest those organizational and grant resources to ensure that the user experience is at the level that we want to provide and that we're being reactive to the use as best as possible. So here is just a general trend across a few of our key reserves. And I'll just say that the key for 2024 is that this data was the data that was input collecting stopped in end of September. So we don't have any information for the fall into the early winter when this slide was originally put together. So we anticipate that obviously the 2024 numbers should exceed what's presented here. And clearly the trend and the information is that we had extremely high and unanticipated visitation during the core of the pandemic, 2020 and 2021. With 2022 returning to kind of the standard where we've then leveled off and grown back. We see that some properties were very highly used. In this case, Housatonic Flats being the most used property that we were measuring in 2020, where other properties changed and shifted over time. I'm trying to see if we have the one I'm thinking of here. We do not. So we also use these as tracking whether the improvements that we've invested in are having the anticipated impact. So this is measuring the Whale Rock Trail at our Thomas and Palmer Reserve in Great Barrington, where utilizing Mass Trail funds in 2020, we expanded to almost a mile of trail, revitalizing Wood Road, doing a reroute, and also constructing new trail up to the top of the hill to a geologic feature termed Whale Rock. And what we've seen is since the addition of that trail, so 2022 being the year that it was installed, that visitation has actually gone up between 15 and 20% over the years. So that by creating more opportunities to recreate on a given property, we're creating and expanding more access and bringing more visitation to this property in particular. That ties into some work that we're going to be doing this year at Thomas and Palmer in conjunction with a trail easement granted to us by the town of Great Barrington. We're going to be expanding off of that woodland trail all the way to Blue Hill Road. And that will create, in addition to the Fountain Pond work that we talked about earlier, a brand new high road segment in Great Barrington that goes from Fountain Pond State Park all the way to Route 23 and should be about 7 miles. So that's a really exciting thing for us that we get to open a new high road segment this year and get to utilize some of those different tools and methods that John talked about with the Tom Ball work. So this is just fascinating stuff. For those folks who are really interested in data and trend analysis, this has been a neat thing. So, excuse me. And we're still, this is this is a growth area for us. So we're still trying to figure out how we can best utilize it to understand what's going on and also to answer the questions that come up both for ourselves internally of how we manage our properties, but how we can respond to different opportunities out there to expand and grow access and partner with other groups. So with that, I'm going to stop my slides and I guess leave it to Kathleen and Taylor to field some questions for us. So thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you both. That was really great. And I can't believe how much has been done in 2024, but how much is kind of on the docket for 2025. It's really exciting stuff. The Town Ball project is particularly, very exciting. So thank you for sharing all of that and for all of your hard work, the trail crew and everybody who makes all of that possible. We do have some questions in the chat. There's a couple here that are site specific to Old Mill. One of the questions is what type of posts were used in the parking lot at Old Mill? And I believe that's for like the railing. That was that question.
John, if you don't know specifically, I believe that they were white oak. I think we erred from using any pressure treated just because of the proximity to the river and not wanting to put any more unnecessary chemicals there. And white oak is a very rot resistant wood that ensures that that investment will last a couple decades in that site.
Yep. Agreed.
Awesome. And this is also specific to Old Mill Trail. I believe it was a similar question. What type of on the pathway for the accessible trail, did we use crusher dust? What type of material were we using on that trail?
Is that like 3/8 minus like?
Yeah, it's an aggregate. I think it's often referred to as airport mix in Massachusetts. Elsewhere, I've heard it as 3/8 minus. So that's the maximum size, and it's all the pieces smaller than 3/8 of an inch in diameter.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Someone had asked, Melanie Glynn has asked, where are the trail counters located? At the start, halfway in, etc. Kind of what location are those?
Yeah, that's a great question. They tend to be at the start. These counters work best. We have, I think, what we consider the most accurate information on trails where it's a loop trail or an out and back. So we have one parking area that people are leaving from and returning to, and that allows us to, do the quick little math and say, for every count that we have that. Every 2 counts that we have, that's one visitation. So generally at the trailheads is best. Sometimes we have to adjust for more complex properties. So thinking about a place like the Boulders or Lueken Ridge, we try to be a little bit more selective so that we get something that's representative. We use additional data from things like the Strava heat map, so understanding how users are recording their hikes, runs, cycling on properties to help us maybe hone in on a site where we believe we're going to capture a higher representative sample. And again, these aren't accurate. They're infrareds, so they, we might get a count at 2 a.m. that is a deer or a bear walking by. So we have to kind of review the data and be thoughtful about it, but it does give us a larger trend that we can relate from. I don't remember specifically, but I think we counted in the 160,000 visitations last year was our estimate. We can't differentiate between one user to another or someone who returns regularly, unfortunately, but that would be a little too invasive for the users. It also, I think when we dig into the data, and this is just me being that kind of data wonky person, is we can go down to the time of the visit. So if we have a lot of weekly visits that say 6, 7, 8 in the morning and like 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon or evening, that gives us a sense that this is a property that tends to have a lot of regular neighborhood or community use versus a property where if it really has most of its visitation on a weekend, that's a spot that is more of a destination hike. And so those two examples would be Old Mill Trail. It's a site that has a lot of regular, consistent community use, and the Hoosick Range up in North Adams tends to be more of that destination hike.
That's great. We definitely had a lot of questions about trail usage data, kind of where, just because I believe, like Meg said, that's very fascinating data. Beyond the trackers, what other methods, if any, are used to track that visitorship? How is it being collected? And in particular, Melanie would like to know if there's a trail counter on the Hoosick Range, if there is one, and could there
Yeah,
potentially be one?
there is one at the Hoosick Range. That's one that we've been collecting, I think, since we first started utilizing these in late 2019. So we started using trail counters right before the pandemic at a number of properties. And so we were able to really capture that surge in visitation that came along with that. So that's the first one. What was the first part of the question, which I've already forgotten, Taylor?
Just like what methods are we using to track visitorship,
Mm.
and how is that data being collected? So I think they're a
Yeah.
similar question, just asked in a different
Okay.
way.
Yeah, so this traffics these trail counters. These are infrared. We it comes into an Excel sheet that or that we can use through the company's DataNet website to kind of ask it for specific data sets, timeframes, what have you. So very anonymized. And so that's something that we can just create, our bar charts or graphs out of. Other places that we get the information from, I mentioned Strava. So that's that, a workout tracking app or a recreation monitoring app that creates heat maps using the user's aggregated GPS data. So where there's a lot of people using Strava on the same trail, it is brighter, it's hotter on that map. So that can help inform us that some trails are more heavily used than others on our properties. Again, helping us to be responsive to those use trends or to prioritize where we're going to devote some of our crew time to make fixes in a given season. It also helps inform us where we might have unpermitted social trails. So where maybe local users are creating their own trails through a property. The last thing that we use is all trails. We're able to get an idea of how many people are looking at a given trail route from there to get a broad sense of that use. We've talked about doing some specific on-site surveys to sample and understand the user population at a given property. So there's that, and then there's the more anecdotal information, which is John being on a trail for a good chunk of the season, getting to know the people that are using that over the course of that trail work period.
Yeah, so a lot of different ways, more so than just that one trail counters, but a lot of, whether that's someone actually on the ground or Strava, different apps. That's great. So it's a lot to collate at the end of the day, and you're weighing it probably in different ways, essentially. And then we have another question from Seth. When do we predict Tomball parking lot will be open?
I'll tell you what my hope is, which is by Memorial Day. We have a contractor. It's under contract. The work's been scoped out. And really, because we're going to be using material that is from the site that'll be sifted and sorted to help create the parking lot, it really requires that material be unsaturated, to be dry enough. And so if we have a very rainy end to our winter, that might set back that time. If our winter remains the way it's been going, they might be able to get out and start site work in March. So that's kind of the unknown. But this is our biggest drive and our biggest commitment to get this property open. So we're aiming for Memorial Day, if not right near there.
Great. Thank you. I know Meg had a secondary question attached to her first, which was, do we have any more plans for accessible reserves or trails coming up this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So broadly, on the recreation side, as part of our organization's larger community-oriented goals, we are really invested in broadening our accessible opportunities and offerings across our portfolio. And I talk about accessibility in that big A, capital A, accessible trails like Thomas and Palmer, like portions of Old Mill Trail, like Parsons Marsh, as well as accessibility in the lowercase a, where we can make choices that broaden access, although might not be at a standard that certain users are able to utilize, but trying to always widen that bell curve of users where the site context makes that possible and our ability to make impacts is feasible. So we are working on a plan to submit to a grant at the end of this month to take the Healthy Heart Loop at the Boulders, which is access from Gulf Road, and bring that up to an accessible grade with a full 6-foot wide trail with bump outs, with benches, eventually maybe some interpretive signage, as well as parking to go along with that. So if we're successful with the grant, that's work that would begin to be implemented in 2026. And so that's our first step. We're looking at, as part of a larger high road connection through Lanesboro from Balance Rock to the Ashweltacook, which is going to be done on Constitution Hill, as well as some other properties that we have interests in, is building, our preference is to build an accessible connection from the town's Bill Laston Park across Town Brook into Constitution Hill, to provide a different type of opportunity in that community. So we're constantly thinking about it. My request of my team is to come up with plans so that we can go after grant opportunities to fund these and have a project lined up every year to make these type of improvements. Whether or not we can actually achieve that, we'll see, but we really want to invest in making those opportunities and broadening the access across our community.
That's terrific. Thank you. Great question. At the Old Mill Trail, how do we determine that we needed both a drain and a rain garden to control runoff? And how did you decide to locate the drain uphill of the rain garden?
That's a great question. Engineers and wetlands permitting specialists. So there's when you are doing work within that shoreline area. So a lot of that was within 100 feet of the bank of the East Branch of the Housatonic. There's very specific math dictated by the Commonwealth as to what you can do. And so we had some mitigation because we removed the old asphalt from there. And so they kind of ran that math and said, well, if we put in a rain garden of this many square feet here, and we are able to collect water here, that it counts for this much mitigation. Some of it too is really just trying to slow down any surplus water. So in those extreme torrential rain events, to ensure that it has time to settle and for the sediment to remain as much on site before it enters the Housatonic, whether through ground or through surface water.
Nice. That's great. I know, and I can answer this question, I believe. This is a question from Roberta. Will a note be sent out to BNRC email list about the opening for Tomball? And yes, indeed, we are very excited to have this opportunity to really have a call out to the public and an invite out to the community and the public at large to have some sort of opening event. So for sure, keep an eye out for that. It will be publicized and shared within the BNRC community, but also much of a wider out to the wider public. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. It kind of towards the end of May, we hope so. Does BNRC own or manage any properties with fire danger?
That's a really timely question.
Yeah.
As we all saw, there was the 1,500-acre butternut fire on East Mountain and Great Barrington back in November. I would say in drought conditions like we had this past year, it's possible for any of our properties to experience forest fire. We have a number of properties and places that we've protected where there is a historic involvement of fire in those ecosystems. There's a woodland portion on Alford Springs that, with appropriate management and impact, a prescribed fire could be really beneficial ecologically. So we're keeping an eye on what's going to be happening on East Mountain to see what happens with that ecosystem. It's my suspicion from my experience and what I've seen up there that with the oaks and hickories that they're going to rebound very well as long as the invasives don't get too much of a jump start on everything. So, really it's up in the air. I hope we don't have as bad of a drought as we had this past year. I will say in places like Great Barrington, like Thomas and Palmer, where the spongy moth outbreak was quite impactful up on the ridgeline, that those are areas that I'm a bit more concerned about fire breaking out and having a more substantial impact on our forest. But we'll see. Fire was part of the New England landscape before the colonists came here. It's going to be a part of our landscape in the future, and we just need to figure out how to adapt our infrastructure and management around those potential flare-ups.
Thank you, Doug. That's really good insight on that. That's something I was wondering myself. So, yeah, anybody else? I don't see any other questions, but I will give a moment. I know there was one question about maybe making the PowerPoint available along with the resources for follow-up. I'm not sure if that is a possibility, but someone asked, was the origin of the butternut fire ever determined?
To my best knowledge, no. The scuttlebutt in town here is that it was likely, people having a small campfire in the woods. So no one's really sure the specific cause of it. Was never identified by the fire marshal or the state's fire service. So unfortunately, we're not too sure, but the rumor mill is filled with suspicions.
And then a follow-up to that, can any workshops be done to address training about fire danger that people could potentially attend, whether it was this year or the next?
That's a great question. Taylor, let's talk.
I know that would be, I don't really know too many, but I feel like that's, even just as a way to field people's concerns and worry, especially with what's going on in California and climate resilience. And yeah, I think that would be, I would like to kind of see something come from that. I think it would be helpful for people. Let me see. Also, do we know how much have the water reservoirs refilled in the Berkshires?
That's information that's outside me. I know we have a property where we recently did some maintenance to the dam outflow, and in a short time the water level came back up. So we're talking close to 100 acre feet that kind of filled back in over the better part of a week. So I think we're doing okay. We have, I think, probably a long way to go to get back to our normal state.
Okay. And I think Melanie, she was wondering specifically if there were any trail counters past the Sunset Loop on Hoosick Range.
Oh, to differentiate between the Sunset Loop use and the Spruce Hill use. Yeah. I don't believe so. The counters themselves are, in the grand scheme, relatively inexpensive, but not that inexpensive. And so we've been pretty fastidious with where we've deployed them so we can catch the most general usage. of those sites. And so, I presented that information on Whale Rock. The counter for that is still at the entrance to Thomas and Palmer. So we're still capturing the general use of the accessible loop and not necessarily differentiating that. We have our property manager, Josh Hopmans, has put together a proposal to expand our use that would allow a little bit more variability in being able to differentiate between, say, that accessible trail loop versus the Woodlands Trail and Whale Rock. But in those cases, we really look for at least a full year of usage to get the best sense of what's happening there. So, a short-term usage is not the best for it. But that's an interesting question, and we'll definitely bring that back to the office and discuss it more as we try to understand how we can use these tools to best respond to our trail usage and trail needs.
Yeah, and like Doug had said, the out and backs and the loops are easier to figure out and kind of capture that data, whereas like something like the high road section going up Mahana Cobble to Lenox Mountain, you could come in from Mahana Cobble, could come all the way from Kripalu, so it's always hard to keep track of if it's someone's going all the way through and not coming back out. It can be a little more trickier to keep track of those through hikes, as it were.
Thank you. I do have two comments here. One is from Alice, just saying that there are some state grants right now for drought resiliency. Particularly North Adams is looking into a state grant that kind of defines better education for water use. And then Roberta has shared that BEAT has an upcoming event to discuss air quality and the butternut fire. So I will include that in the resources in the follow-up to this email, because I think that's great and really timely and pertinent to all of our interests at this point. So let me see. I think Melanie said, thank you for doing all the heavy lifting. If no one has any other questions, I just want to say, thank you to Doug and Jonathan and Kathleen and for being here tonight and putting together such a robust presentation, and one that really has, I think, all of us looking forward to what's ahead for 2025. And thank you to all of the folks that weren't here but made all of these things happen. That's really great. And yeah, thank you to everybody who was able to attend and ask such great questions and support BNRC in this work, whether that's just popping in or helping and volunteering. And we will follow up with some resources and a recording of this presentation. I believe we can also include the PowerPoint. I will talk to everybody afterwards, and this will also be posted on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, and we will get that up so you can reference it or share as you will. But thank you everybody for attending, and have a wonderful evening.
See you on the trails.
Indeed.
Thank you.